I just, again, want to say thank you to Marlene, really, for, number one, inviting me, but she didn't just invite me. She came out to the Arts Garage, and she continues to show me support, and that means a lot, and I know all of you guys are artists in the room, and you know what it's like to be vulnerable with your work, and a lot of my work is really vulnerable, and it always feels really special when people, seek me out and want me to come out and talk about what I do, want me to read my pieces. This presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about fear, but I'm also going to share some of the pieces from my first collection, Close Your Eyes, Now Breathe. I am saying now first collection because I have put together an entire second manuscript that is now, I recently had a professor from Old School Square look at it, and I'm sending it out and entering it in competitions. So I have a second manuscript that I know is going to be 1,000 times better than this first one, and I'm excited about that. But again, thank you to everybody for coming out, for some people coming out, taking off work to be here. It really does mean a lot. Okay. So I always want to start off by saying, so this first copy, Close Your Eyes, Now Breathe, and if you purchase one, it won't come with the sticky notes, this is just mine, is my first body of poetry. It's my first published body of work. It was self-published January of this year. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I became a writer and talk about fear in that sense, and then I will go ahead and read some of these poems. So the first time I picked up the pen to write a poem, I was actually in 3rd grade. I have a box of a lot of my poetry. I have a box of my diaries, all at the house here in Delray now, and I'm hoping to do something with them. But the first poem I ever wrote was about a character coming out of the television. And I remember reading it and thinking, wow, okay. But I didn't really begin to consistently write until I got to about 5th or 6th grade. And so I have a collection of 3 or 4 notebooks, those old black and white notebooks, where I wrote almost every single day. And when I look back at my writing, and if you've read Close Your Eyes, Now Breathe, you'll get the sense that there is a lot of pain in this first book. And when I go back and I read some of my diaries from 5th and 6th grade and some of those poems, there is a lot of pain. So when I began to write consistently, I began to write about a lot of things that were causing me pain. And if you read the flyer, you read that I experienced trauma as a child. I experienced many years of sexual trauma as a child. And for me, 5th and 6th grade, when I was writing poetry, that poetry was very vulnerable. It was very painful because it was the way that I could communicate the shame and guilt that I felt for something I couldn't understand. And my parents, I didn't speak to them until my senior year of high school. And I'm doing the whole therapy thing. So now writing is more than just therapy. Now I'm actually, going to therapy. But starting out writing was therapy for me. And I know art is that for many of you. Writing is that for many of you. But eventually, by the time I got to high school, I started to write about beautiful things. It was less about the pain and more just really learning how to channel feelings and thoughts and imagination through my words. So in high school, I became a board member for my literary magazine, and I began to connect with other poets. That high school year, my senior year of high school, I also learned about spoken word poetry. I had never realized that there was a group of people out there who would actually speak their words and act them out and feel them. And that was really exciting for me because I am an expressive person. And so when I got to college, I began to do open mics and I began to do slam poetry. And that's when I became the most comfortable, I would say, in my own words and in my art. By my senior year of college, I was given the opportunity to open up for Nikki Giovanni. So for those of you who don't know Nikki Giovanni, she's an American poetess. She is amazing. She's, I like to call her a badass poet. She's truly, truly inspiring. I mean, she talks a lot about race. She talks a lot about pain. But she talks a lot about family. She talks a lot about just normal human interactions that we have every day. But she does it in such a powerful way. And I mean, I was just shaken. I was opening up for her in front of a few hundred people at Hendricks Chapel at Syracuse University. But even while I was doing all of that, I had this voice in my head that kept telling me, you're not good enough to be a poet. And a lot of it came because of fear. I had known that I wanted to be a writer for a really long time. It's all I ever wanted to do. When I was younger, I talked about wanting to be a nun because I grew up in Haiti and I was around nuns a lot. But by the time I got to America, I realized I wanted to be a writer and not a nun. But even with that, where I accomplished one of my dreams of connecting with an idol, I still felt like I was not good enough. And maybe I was never going to publish that book. And so by the time I graduated college, I moved down here. This is 4 years. I just kept saying, like, enough. I saw all these young women who were out pursuing their dreams of being poets. And so I was like, I don't know if I'm good enough. And so one day I just kind of said, enough, Flows, just jump and just do it. And so I sat down behind my laptop and I pulled out years of poetry. I looked at a few hundred pieces and I brought it down to this book. And I did it by myself, with the exception of Diane Allardyce, who is the co-founder of Toussaint Louverture. It is a high school in Delray. Is it still in Delray, Jim? Oh, it's
closed.
It is now closed. But Diane was my first and only beta reader. And then she handed the book back to me. And all the while, I can be an overthinker, and I'm quite OCD, and I'm a perfectionist. So I'm a lot of those things. And every time I would read the book, I found things that I didn't like and things that I didn't want. And so that voice kept coming back again. And I just kind of had to just do it. Because if I didn't publish that book, I was never going to do it. So I made a decision of this year. I said, you know what? Whatever it looks like, I'm just going to do it. And so I did it. And I say this to say that I stopped letting fear direct one of my greatest passions in life. And Close Your Eyes Now Breathe is not perfect. Like President Obama said about some of his own works, when he goes back and he reads his earlier 2 books, he's like, Barack, why did you write this? Or the Barack today wouldn't write what Barack wrote 10 years ago. And I think that's okay, because books they're kind of like a snapshot in time. Whatever I needed to say at that point, I said. And Close Your Eyes Now Breathe is perfect in every single way, because those were the things I needed to say. And so I jumped, and I didn't have enough money for an editor, and I used my savings to pay a friend who charged me like nothing to design the cover. I had, a release party, and I just kind of jumped and I did it. And I think once you do whatever you want to do and what you're destined to do and what God and the universe and all of that wants you to do, everything else falls into place. So what started to happen for me once this book was published, I received so much love and support. I started looking out for events. Like when Marlene came up to me at the event for All People's Day, people approached me and I talked to them and I talked about my experiences, and doors started to open. And so I've been able to perform at the Women's March in West Palm Beach, at the Arts Garage. BET has named me one of their, millennial feminist poets to look out for. Doors started to open up for me, and I realized that, fear is kind of a silly thing. And now I've gotten to the place where I'm working on the second manuscript, and I constantly tell myself it's going to be a bestseller, because this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, and this is what I want to live off of. I want to write every single day of my life. And this book is a constant reminder that whatever it is you want to do, just do it. Jump, do it. And so that is Close Your Eyes Now, Breathe. And if there's anything I want you all to remember from this presentation, it's to just always say no to fear. Say no to the voices that say you're not good enough, or you're too young, or you're too old, or too stupid, too ugly. Tell them to shut up and just jump. And I think discomfort, and I have this conversation with my students a lot, there's so much learning to be done in discomfort. I often am uncomfortable in certain situations. I often am uncomfortable talking about some of the serious things that are going on inside of my head and my heart. But there's so much learning to be done in that, and you just got to sit and listen to yourself, and then you got to shut fear aside, and then you got to do what you're destined to do.